بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We will continue from Hadith number 2 from the Shama'il Tirmidhi, from the chapter of the noble features of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So very quickly to recap, Hadith number 1, we discussed a few different topics or a few different things in Hadith number 1. One of the first things we talked about in Hadith number 1 was how tall Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was. The second thing that was discussed was his complexion. The third thing that was discussed was his noble hair. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's hair, how it wasn't very straight, nor was it very curly, it was slightly wavy, and also there was a slight mention of how many white hairs there were on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's head. The fourth thing that was mentioned was how old he was when he passed away from this world, how many years he spent in Mecca and how many years he spent in Medina. So those were the things that were discussed in Hadith number 1. We will be continuing today on Hadith number 2, which is still regarding the noble features of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Hadith number 2. Anas bin Malik radiyallahu anhu reports, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was of a medium stature. He was neither very tall nor very short. Okay, so that was discussed in Hadith number 1 as well, the fact that he had medium stature, and in some hadith it is mentioned that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam stood out in a crowd. That was, and I explained that was due to a miracle and not because he was extremely tall. It then states he was very handsome, of medium build, and his hair was neither very curly nor very short. We talked about how handsome Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was, and how his beauty was not made manifest to the people. Otherwise, they would not be able to bear that. It would be overwhelming. We discussed that in Hadith number 1 as well. He was of medium build, and his hair was neither very curly nor very straight. He had a wheat-colored complexion. In Hadith number 1, we discussed Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's complexion, and in this hadith, which is also narrated by Anas bin Malik, because Hadith number 1 was narrated by Hazrat Anas radiallahu anhu, this hadith has also been narrated by Hazrat Anas. Now, in this hadith, Hazrat Anas says that he had a wheat-colored complexion, which indicates that his skin color was a brown type of a color. And in Hadith number 1, he stated that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not brown. So apparently it seems to contradict. Okay, so what is actually derived from the two hadith is that Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not of such a dark complexion that would decrease the lightness of a person. Now, on the topic of complexion, one thing I want to clarify is that it doesn't matter what color a person is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not look at the color of a person. We are mentioning the complexion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam so that we can visualize how he might have looked, and not discuss whether a particular color is better than another color. In fact, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was very clear on the color of people's skin. During the last sermon of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which was delivered on the 9th of Zulhijjah, on the Mount of Arafat, in the valley of Mount Arafat in Mecca, during his farewell pilgrimage, he mentioned and he stated, all mankind is from Adam and Eve. All mankind is from Adam and Eve. An Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab. No, a non-Arab has any superiority over an Arab. Also, a white person has no superiority over a black person. No, a black person has any superiority over a white person, except by piety and good action. So just because of your skin color, you cannot become better than someone else. Islam does not believe in racism. Islam is against racism. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this in the Quran. Allah says, Ya ayyuhan nas, إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا. O men, Allah addresses humans, mankind, not just Muslims, but Allah addresses the whole of mankind. Ya Yuhannas, because in many places of the Quran, Allah addresses the believers. And in this particular verse, Allah is addressing mankind. Allah is addressing all of the humans. O men, we created you from a male and female and formed you into nations and tribes that you may recognize each other. لِتَعَارَفُوا. We have created you from nations and tribes that you may recognize each other. He who is more God conscious and God fearing has great honor with Allah. So inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The person who is more God fearing and more God conscious, he is the one who has great honor with Allah. Allah is all knowing and well informed. So you can clearly see from the verses of the Quran and from the last sermon of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that racism does not exist in Islam. Islam is totally against racism. A person belonging to a particular nation cannot be better than another person who does not belong to that nation. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was an Arab, yet he said that an Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab except by piety and good actions. So I just want you to point that out, because we are talking about the complexion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the complexion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was radiant and luminous. He was not extremely white, nor was he extremely dark. However, a person who is extremely white or a person who is extremely dark doesn't necessarily is not necessarily degraded in the eyes of Allah just because of their skin color. It is only through their piety and good action that a person can get closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I hope that clears any misconceptions or any questions that may arise in a person's mind regarding the complexion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and what the position of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was with regards to skin color and with regards to nationality. Okay, continuing from there. When he walked, he leaned forward slightly. Okay, in this hadith, the word yatakaffa'u is used regarding the walking of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The ulama interpret this word in several ways. Some say it means to walk at a fast pace. Some are of the opinion that it means to lean a bit forward while walking. Some say that it means to lift the leg with force. All three explanations are correct, because the walk of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam fulfilled all three descriptions, and the word also conveys these three meanings. Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam walked quickly and not like the Romeos of this age. It was also the noble habit of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to walk with a slight forward inclination of the head and shoulders. This actually demonstrates the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's humbleness. He would walk leaning forward, looking down on the earth. Unlike the people of today who like to or tend to bowl when they are walking, especially the men, this is not permissible. We should not be walking with arrogance or pride. We should be walking in humility and humbleness. Don't forget that we have been created from the earth, and to the earth we will return. So, we need to think about these things. Even our walk says a lot of things about us. The Prophet ﷺ did not walk with his chest pushed out in pride. He lifted his legs as men do while walking and did not drag his legs on the ground. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to act upon this hadith and to follow the Prophet ﷺ in every aspect of our lives. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta wa astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.